Hello and welcome to the Brave Hearts, Bold Minds podcast, Growing Fine Young Men. I'm Lee Hatcher. Thanks for joining me on this journey into how to help the boys of today grow into the fine young men of tomorrow. Each week, I'll be interviewing an educator from the Scots College in Sydney to uncover very practical tools with which parents of school-age boys can engage, encourage and challenge their sons for wisdom and compassion. So let's ring the bell and meet our guest for this week's podcast. With me today is Gaye Entwistle, Director of the Scots College Early Learning Centre, whose message is boys need us to capture their imagination. Gaye, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Great to meet you. I want you to begin with the story of the educational philosophy that originated in the town in Italy, in North Italy, called Reggio Emilia, how that's shaped your own view of raising boys, especially when it comes to imagination.
Sure. The philosophy that comes out of the north of Italy is one that is really empowering for boys. It speaks to the boys having their own voice and their own democratic right to be involved in their learning. And so it elevates them to a place where they are put on a par with a teacher who can be a supporter. And one of those beautiful things that happens when you're 3 is your imagination goes wild, and quite often your teacher's left to catch up. So the power of Reggio in my life has been to acknowledge that the boys are very present, that they have an enormous amount to bring, that they have governance over their own direction of learning, that they can be powerful learners, and that our job is to pull out of them as much as they've got to offer and encourage them to make that next step.
So you're not just pouring information into a jar.
No, the days
Yes.
Gone, well and truly gone. If you think about IT or any of the current sort of surges in content and generation, most 4-year-olds can program a phone. Most teachers say, oh, what does that button do? So they're definitely well ahead of us, and they're not waiting to be poured into. They're waiting to be excited and encouraged and supported and told they can, and it's wonderful, and let's go together, all those sorts of fun things.
From your wealth of experience, but also from the educational research, what is it about boys that they need imagination?
Well, for so many boys, they have a fascination or they have a sense of interest in something in particular, but they also have a very strong sense of their own vulnerability. If there's any sense of impediment about getting into new content, their nervous system kicks in and I don't think I can takes over very quickly.
Okay.
So taking on board all the things that they have, taking the lid off all the experiences and making them as open-ended as possible, boys have the ability to let the imaginary come into the stories of learning and fact. If we just lived in the land of science and we only talked about fact and we only talked about the fact that the teachers know, we probably wouldn't have ended up on the moon. Somebody had to wonder and explore and maybe possibly and perhaps we could. And as we found out, the astronauts right there and then on the spot in the Apollo flights had to use their imagination and think of a filter a different way. Our boys are geared up that way. Imagination meets science with facts, but imagination is the exciting bit that allows the facts to sort of grow and have a place.
So this is blowing completely out of the water. I'm just thinking rote learning for boys.
Well, rote learning...
And I agree.
It's the most boring. And it seems to be what everybody historically, remembers about school, the times table. And there is a place for learning facts and being prepared and understanding them, but it's much more exciting if you plonk a bag of lollies in the middle of the table and say, how are we going to make this share out in a fair way?
Goodness. This is almost a life-defining conversation for me, having gone through all that rubbish.
So we can get to times tables and we can get to learning if we go through strategy. And so imagination, I'm just imagining that big bag of lollies is actually all for me. She has to share it out. Okay, I can help. So the brain kicks into overload. Any of the topics that we pick, if we take the lid off and ask them and wonder about them, at the beginning of the year, I often tell the story about how we have the pest control inspectors right at the top of the hill. And after the holidays, all the spiders have come back and they take out their super squirty guns and they go hunting for spiders. Well, every boy wants to know where they're going, what are they doing, where are they hiding, what are they like, are they dangerous? And so our humble pest inspectors become the star attractions.
I know, I
and
bet.
suddenly we start collecting species names and web shapes and how many legs and how many eyes and how fast do they move and where do they go. I wonder where they live. I wonder if they've got a family.
Fantastic.
And so the meeting place of imagination and wondering and fact and mundane, boring activities like spraying the spiders after the holidays becomes a whole exciting journey. And we like to think that that same thing happens with spelling and writing and reading and maths.
Yeah.
If we take the lid off and we allow imagination into those factual areas, it gives us the boost to see a purpose for them and a way to enter.
Like with dragons. So
Like
you've got a case study, and I
dragons.
just want to kind of find out how this is going to work practically. What's it going to
Yeah.
look like, feel like?
Yeah, so we have a group of little boys who are very good readers and writers, and they're in our kindy age group, so they're 5-year-olds. And I started the term by thinking, I've got these really cool books. They're so great. They've got fabulous pictures, dragons, boys, match made in heaven.
You're the teacher.
And I pulled out the book and showed them the book, and they, oh, yeah, the book. Oh, that's interesting.
Right,
Oh, yeah, there's another one. Oh, boring. What else you got? And I said, well, I don't know, these dragons, maybe we could think of a better one. Maybe we could make one. Make one? Oh, yes, and he could have 3 heads and he could have 10 wings and he could have poison in his tail. Okay, well, let's make one. Yes, let's make one.
Wow.
So we quickly sat around drawing pictures and making them and all the wonderful ideas and the language came pouring out. No, he would need wings that were waterproof so he could dive. He'd need sharp teeth so he could crab the fish, fabulous. And in that process then we picked up all these details about features and characteristics which very quickly could turn into a report. My dragon is, my dragon looks like, my
Yes,
dragon
yes,
lives
yes.
with, my habitat, whatever it might be. But then as we started to make it, it walked very quickly into the land of imagination. And then we had to decide whether they were real. Well, are dragons real? Oh, well, we've got them in a book. Oh, I've seen pictures of them.
Oh.
They might be real.
Speaking of which,
They might be real and they might be, maybe they're dinosaurs. Maybe they were dinosaurs that we just didn't know. Maybe they could be. Maybe they're just in people's imagination. So once we created this huge fertile place for all this thinking and learning and connection, we travelled from the notion of looking at pictures, figuring out what they were like, classifying, identifying, developing, growing, making, building. Then we walked into the report language and then finally we were into that lovely territory of is it fact or is it fiction?
yes.
And then
yes.
because they'd started talking about what this dragon could do, then suddenly we had a text that we could start generating a narrative. So now we've got a fabulous book that's on the go, boys' pictures, we've got some horrible dragon-chasing chiefs of villages, we've got a little boy called Ice, we've got a chief who doesn't want his boy to write any stories, he wants him just to chase the dragons. And then we're in the territory of being able to get back to the formal stuff,
Yes,
which
yes.
they wouldn't have been able to enter
Yes.
to start with, where they're happy to write. Okay, let's write our own book. Let's write our own book.
Yeah.
Very excited.
My guess is that you as a teacher are probably a bit surprised at what comes up out of these conversations and this
amazing.
process.
The good book says, you know, from the mouth of babes. And
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
I live in that land of evident.
What a buzz,
else?
actually.
What else?
Yeah.
What else can you tell me? What else do I know about? And they're always able to make a connection that you don't think of. Or they're always able to link it back to an idea that connects to them personally. And I guess that's the other part of the ability to live in that land of governing a little bit of the direction. If the teacher came in and said, good morning, boys, here's your piece of paper, we're going to write a 3-page narrative on a dragon, I know that there would be a room full of glazed eyes and a lot of stillness and quietness.
Get me out of here.
Yeah,
Yes.
or even tears. I can't do this, tantrum, trauma, running around the room, fear, horror. But they had no idea that we'd done the same task and they were so excited.
Does this apply to every boy? So you're saying that every boy has this imagination?
Yeah, I believe they do.
Yes.
I think it's sometimes connected more to confidence than ability. If you have a conversation one-on-one with a boy and he's in a safe place, he can tell you far more language, much more explaining, much more entry into the topic in that sort of situation than in other places. Quite often you need to find that trigger, that one thing that is his fascination. The saddest of stories I've heard about things that fascinated was a drain. And we wanted to know which way the water went and why did the water go.
We'll need plumbers tomorrow.
Exactly. So if you could cope with talking about a drain for 30 minutes, you could probably get all sorts of amazing kind of imagination stories.
Yeah.
But yeah, every boy does. And I found that boys who have what we would classically call high needs or who would need extra support in a learning environment, if they can enter it through talking or they can enter it through drawing or they can enter it in by way of a dramatic retell. They love to act out stories and plays. They love to dance. Reggio Emilia talks about how children have 100 languages and we just need to understand the language they're telling us the story in. So clay is a language, singing a song is a language, drawing is a language, acting is a language. And of course we can do that writing and reading stuff as well, but we can express the way that we're learning through so many different ways.
Sometimes boys are accused of just sitting there daydreaming.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that that's probably okay.
Yeah, perfect example of my little dragon group. I was trying to inspire these boys to focus on a little bit more detail. So how are we going to develop the characters in this story? There's a dad. Oh, he looks really grumpy. Yeah, you've made a very grumpy face on him. That's fantastic. What's a really grumpy name? Chief Grumpy. Chief Unhappy.
This is his dad.
Chief Dad, yeah, who was very unhappy. And one little boy said, stop, just stop talking. I need to think. And it was just that reminder that entering that space can be very real, very big, very tactile to them. And sometimes our crowding in and redirecting limits their ability to learn, limits their imagination. And that can be so damaging because then it limits the output.
Yes.
So this little guy was saying, I've got it, just give me space. Lord have mercy, I could put in a little speech bubble above his head. And then he came out with the name that he'd picked and the character that he'd picked and what he was like and how the name was connected. If my name is Ice, he has to have something bigger and nastier and mountaintop, icy mountaintop glacier. And I thought, fabulous.
This is gold.
Yeah. And so that move from imagination, wondering, thinking, I could be just having a daydream or I could be just in a land that's continually enriching itself. And when I've got enough of those pieces, then I'm ready to share.
Is there a challenge of a boy just living in the world of imagination, that it doesn't go further than that?
Yeah, I suppose there is, but most boys love to tell you about what's in their story. They say teaching is about the 3 R's, but my 3 R's are relationship. So if I'm engaged in their world, if I understand what their love or excitement is, if I allow Aloysius Murgatroyd to do his drawing first and do his talking next and then help him into that formalised version of writing it down, then the imagination for them has a trail. It has a natural path, a development, and there's a purpose to it.
And you also say there's a connection with a boy's sleep with all this stuff.
Yeah. Some little boys we certainly know of have very dysregulated sleeping patterns. Their brains are on hyperdrive. They can't stop thinking. In a grown-up world, if you've had a tough day, you're trying to troubleshoot, you're thinking about the woes before you, you often stare at the roof. It's 3 o'clock, I wish I could turn over. I can't get rid of that thought. What am I going to do about that staff member? What am I going to do about that deadline? What am I going to do about... Little boys quite often live in the land. There's so much on the go. There's so much happening that they can't switch off. And so for many of our boys, we have to capture that imagination. And so the before you go to sleep dreaming, the before you go to sleep storytelling, that before you go to sleep letting mum hear about your imagination, drawing the pictures, reading that favourite book, is all part of helping that sleeping pattern. They say if you sleep and your dream cycle is interrupted, your sleep is interrupted. I have the same philosophy about the boys and imagination. If we constrain them, if we put them in boxes, if we say only put in one word about the dragon in that one box and move on to the next topic without letting them really dance around the information, tell us everything they've got to go, they're going to be frustrated, they're going to be tied in knots, and that gets in the way. So I see certainly the imagination as being such a liberating phase of life for everybody.
So what are you going to tell parents about how this might apply at home, outside the educational context?
We have spent a bit of time thinking about the old dreaded homework environment. Lots of parents think I should. Lots of parents think I hate it, but I must. Some teachers think it's pretty pointless, but it's a big pile of marking. Some teachers think it's great because I can... So we've reshaped our home learning, we call it, and part of that is understanding what's the boy's passion. So part of their week has to be devoted to something that they're really passionate about. And we see the amazing things come into school, fishing rods and football jumpers.
There's another podcast on
Another
that
podcaster. They come in with fabulous calligraphy sets that they've been working on with Granddad, balsa wood constructions, all sorts of things. But some of them will come in with shells that just fascinate them. I wonder who lived in here. I wonder how it went. I wonder where it came from. I wonder if it lives at the bottom of the ocean. I wonder. Oh. And so parents being engaged in that kind of, what do you really get fascinated about? What are you wondering about? Without turning into the mum who takes over every brain space and every conversation with, what are you thinking? What are you doing? But giving them space to breathe.
Yes.
But really understanding what they're interested in, fanning that flame, the Titanic, the dinosaur, the spacecraft, the Lego fascination with whatever it might be, old world constructions. Allowing the boys to let you know what the fascination is, connecting that to something that they can do at home, and then ultimately making that next connection to something real and worthwhile. Space is about a real job. It's a real world. It's a real form of science. What do we do with it, and how do we take it to its nth degree?
Who knows where that might lead?
Exactly.
Can you wrap up our wonderful conversation with a story of one particular boy or a class where you've seen this?
Yeah. For so many of our boys, school can be tough, and it starts with that very first sinking feeling when they wake up, putting on the uniform, the routine of getting into the car, facing all those unknown adventures that lay ahead. Will she be there? Won't she be there? Is there going to be a change of routine? Is it going to be rain? I'm not going to be able to play. All those things. There are moments in the days where boys need to be able to live in the space that grants them freedom. And that freedom space is usually connected to something that they're really excited about. They come up with the most amazing things to be excited about. One of the little boys that I highly prize and spend lots of time with, his little safe zone is drawing. It can be dragons, it could be monsters, but having that little gap of how I just need a break from all the world's pushing on me, from how fast the world's going, how complicated the decisions are, how many changes there are. I just need a time to change. So what we do is we do build in playtimes and we do build in free choice times, but we also join in, for many of the boys, what we call break times. And the break times are really places where their heads can be in a space where it's comfortable. And so for many of the boys that come to visit me, it's not always, what have you done again and here's your detention. Very rarely. It's, hello mate, how's your day going? Feeling a bit stressed? Are you worried about something? Can I help you? What would you like to draw about? And just creating that little stillness where we can wander through imagination and wondering again, express it in a different way. Some will build blocks, like I said, the 100 languages. Some of them will draw. Some of them will just talk and tell me everything they know about how you put the hook through the nose of the fish so it doesn't wiggle out. And that creates a little gap where if they went straight back to the room, if they went straight back onto a task, that gap wouldn't be built in. So allowing boys space for imagination, space to be who they are in a connected way, in a relationship with other people, means that we get so much more out of them, and their ability to learn and engage is enhanced so much more.
How enlightening, and what a difference, I'm sure, this has made for the boys here. Gaye Entwistle, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Pleasure.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank
if
you.
you'd like more information about growing your boy into a fine young man, you can subscribe to receive useful articles and news from the Scots College. It's free and offered to every parent who wants the very best for their boy in their journey to manhood. On your internet search engine, enter the Scots College e-newsletter to subscribe. I'm Lee Hatcher. Hope you'll join me again next week on the Brave Hearts, Bold Minds podcast, Growing Fine Young Men. Now, Gaye, final task, ring us out.
Thanks. Time to line up. Here's the bell.